How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. So thank you for joining the Wellness and Wahala podcast. So for those of you tuning in for the first time, Wahala in Nigerian Pidgin English means issues and problems. And I have a special guest today, going to give us great gist on how to avoid various Wahala. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. It is a great honor. She is my Nigerian American Shigerian queen. So for those of you that don't know, we go way back. So grew up in Chicago, of course, from Nigerian parents. So that's where the Shigerian comes from, the Chicago Nigerian mix. But today I have Lola Dada-Olley. She is a barrister, attorney, y'all. She's an advocate, a podcast host of Not Your Mama's Autism, a wife, and an autism mom of 2 and an autism sibling. So, y'all, she's a queen. I salute you. And I know that you're tackling various Wahala in different spheres that you exist. So I am once again honored to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my Shigerian sister.
Yes, sir. So by saying that we want to celebrate World Autism Day. It is celebrated annually April 2nd, and Lola is really an ambassador for people that have autism. And I wanted to talk more about that. As you know, we celebrate this special day. We recognize the rights of people with autism, and this year observance for the United Nations and globally takes place in the middle of this COVID-19 Wahala pandemic crisis that nobody has really experienced in their lifetime before. This is an unprecedented crisis, and it's really affecting people, especially people that have autism, at disappropriate risk because of the coronavirus impact on our society. So I wanted to hear more about how you started Not Your Mama's Autism during this, unprecedented time, to really tell your story on the reasons why you launched now, for such a time as this. So over to you.
That's an excellent question. It's funny too, because when I started this podcast and we made this family decision to go all in as a family with this podcast, it was 3 months into the pandemic, right?
Hey,
so
at the heat, and it's been 1 year now, you guys, so you can imagine.
yes, it was about three or so months in, and we listened to the news, and I wish I could remember which newscast this was, but they were talking about the tolls of hospitalizations and deaths, and they said, the anchor said something to the effect of, it's kind of morbid, but I'll just say it. He said, there will be some people watching this that will not be watching this by the end of the year because due to COVID-19, they may not be around. And it got me really thinking about my life and about legacy and about how there really is no perfect time to start something or to launch something. I think sometimes as being particularly, daughters or sons of immigrants, you have this sometimes type A personality, maybe perfectionist mentality that I sometimes fall into. Like, I want to do this, but the conditions have to be perfect, So I've been wanting to do something in the storytelling realm for a long time about my family. And now it's like, okay, why not this time? There is no perfect time. But I'm just going to start it now. We're just going to see where this goes.
And I think you just said a key thing, like it's never a perfect time, and being first generational and the pressure that is put on us, from our parents as the first generational Americans is a lot, and I appreciate it now being parents, but looking back, I used to be like, these parents, what's wrong with them? But they made a lot of sacrifices. A lot of them had really good jobs and they were doing well, and they migrated here to the U.S. For really the American dream, to give us their children better opportunities. But even in America, we still have a lot of disparities and inequalities that exist. So I wanted you to speak about that, and I'm so happy and honored that you were able to take the bold step. You just said something that in the first quarter, first 3 months of the pandemic, where everything was just all over the place. I mean, schools shutting down, so just so many different challenges, and it's been 1 year now and we're still experiencing a lot of challenges. So can you speak on some of those challenges of children that has autism, and you have 2 children during this pandemic, so like the virtual learning, even children that don't have autism are struggling, and children that have other disabilities, like my daughter, she has a IDP plan with her school, and she had a learning reading disability when she was younger, and her children and her teachers did not identify it. So you know what I'm saying? So what are the challenges of even like the teachers, some teachers not being trained to identify certain issues, working with counselors and psychologists? Like, it takes a village. So like, what are some of the challenges that you have seen during this pandemic?
Sure. So even in order to bring this in full context for my family, I want to briefly give you some context of how things were even before the pandemic. Because like you've wonderfully touched upon, it was not easy before the pandemic. So I used to say, us being both of Nigerian background, everyone knows that African proverb, it takes a village. One of my sayings is it takes at least 2 villages when you have a child with, a different type of a need. So, and then I have ×2. So I guess that means I need 3 villages.
Multiple villages. You can't even count many villages.
Exactly. I just know that 1 is not enough. That I do. I do know. So before the pandemic, we have a team of physical therapists and occupational therapists and behavioral therapists and child psychologists and a psychiatrist and a nutritionist, and those are the ones that can, and a developmental pediatrician and a conventional pediatrician, and so not to mention special education teachers, their staffs, and then the school version of all those things as well. So that was all before the pandemic, and we had put together a really well-tuned machine. So we also had a team of 3 caretakers who would pick up my daughter from school and take her to afternoon therapy, then come back and pick up my son and take them both to evening therapy. Things were moving so well that I should have known that something was around the corner.
Hey, don't say that. That's the African saying that it's too good to be true. Wahala go land.
and it came in the view of a global pandemic, a truly global. So when governors across the country were issuing their stay-at-home orders, the way it ravaged the community, communities like ours, was we need human support to thrive. We all do, but specifically the instruction when it comes to special education for my daughter in particular, she's someone who you would refer to as high touch. So oftentimes her instruction requires hand over hand, or in her speech therapy, she has a highly specialized speech therapy that requires hand over mouth to help her move the muscles around her mouth because she has apraxia. And apraxia on top of the autism is when the muscles around your mouth aren't always fully formed. So it's difficult for you to, emulate certain words.
Oh, okay.
So you can imagine during a global pandemic where there's supposed to be 6 feet of social distancing, that instruction now goes out the window.
Yeah. So all the way.
Yeah. So now virtually trying to mimic these same things through telehealth was, to say it was a To say it was an adjustment period is the understatement of the decade, right? So my daughter unfortunately regressed the first several months of the pandemic because first of all, she also has, along with autism, she has an intellectual disability. So she didn't understand why her world radically changed. We couldn't explain it to her.
Yes.
So we had to adjust. And my husband refers to it as Swiss Army knife parenting.
Hey, I like that one.
What we did is we turned our home partially into a clinic. And I know that I understand we are very privileged. We even have the room to do so because parents in our situation who, in other parts of the country where, if you're like in New York, for instance, you're likely to have a much smaller, home. How does this work? How would you bring in all these home therapists? So we had a team of home therapists come in for our daughter to administer behavioral therapy. And then when it comes to the other forms of therapy, we had a telehealth option, but that means that mommy and daddy now have to be therapists, right? So,
yep.
So I have
it transitions to mommy and daddy.
Exactly. So when other parents were talking about having to be teachers and talking about that stress, we were teachers, we were
therapists, everything.
You were
creators, innovators, everything. Right, because you got to create an innovative space for all of this.
Yes. So
that's fun and, that they can relate to.
Exactly. That's exactly what we had to do. If you see our room, we have hammocks in one part. We have like a trampoline in one part. We just did everything we could. And that's what we did and what we're currently doing. And we are building our resilience muscles one day at a time. But we literally had to switch away from having multiple clinic options to mostly in home. And once we all knew the importance of masks and social distancing, the kids were able to do occupational therapy at a clinic twice a week. So they do that. That's how they get out of the house. But everything else is in home. And we're still working full-time too from home. It's a lot.
Right.
You get it?
Look, it's not just when you don't have these type of challenges, but, just for parents, that don't have these challenges, but you already have these challenges even pre-pandemic. And then, to add on this crazy pandemic without, a timeline of an end date.
Exactly.
Once again, it's over 1 year now. And just to put it into perspective, just from a public health point of view, we've had over 500 deaths and 500,000 deaths, mortality in America. And of course, globally is like over 1 million. And if we were to do like a minute of silence for everybody that we've lost in this pandemic, we'll be here for months. So, I tell people, I said, just to put it in that perspective, that this pandemic is quite different from what we've ever experienced. Of course, being in the field of public health, we tackle, ongoing epidemics from HIV to polio to the last big one was Ebola, which had a higher mortality rate. We didn't have, a complete shutdown, but because this is a respiratory virus that can be easily spread, through the air, that's why it's a big challenge in the world. And when it comes to public health, when the outbreak initially happened in China, it should have been shut down. We should have shut down way earlier because we could have prevented this from going from epidemic to pandemic mode. But anyways, there's lessons learned even from a public health from a public health standpoint and from a political standpoint, because, everybody's affected. So, there's nobody that you meet that has not been affected by this pandemic directly or indirectly. But especially, that's why I said, I salute you, Queen. I salute, your husband and just your village of supporters, which gets me to my next question. That, you said, which is common, for us, that it takes a village, and you now have multiple villages. But, when you talk about people that don't really have a village, or, the social determinants of health, they don't have a good socioeconomic status, you're privileged, you have a home that you can create, such enabling environment for your children. Some people don't. Some people are even losing their homes and losing jobs during this time. So, what will be, your advice to just the different types of village of supporters that you need? You might have, for example, like your religious supporters, your praying community, because, a lot of this, we got to tackle from the spiritual aspect. Then you have your health community, just like you said, psychologists and counselors and, telemedicine. Like what, can you break down the different village of support systems so people can really get a bird's eye view picture of what you're really going through and what people really need when they say they need a village of support? It goes deeper than that.
Oh, definitely. I think you've broken it down really well. I would say it falls into 3 categories. For us, it's our faith community for sure, and then even within the faith community, you have to make sure that you have people who get it. Because that's probably a podcast episode for another day, but sometimes within the faith community you could have folks that actually within any village community you really have to have the right-minded people who understand that they have to get their hands dirty, they got to roll up their sleeves and help you in a way that it's true vulnerability in order to thrive as parents in our situation. From my own personal experience, I have been very, very open with members of our faith community and very real about what we need and why we need it. That's one part of the community. And then there is what I call the ride or die. So the inner circle of friends that, if in our culture they would say as if kata bust, right? So
hey, yes, sir.
If what that means for people who don't understand
who don't know, break it down,
yes.
So
when things get truly raw and truly bad, and what does that mean?
The biggest wahala.
So let me give you an example of how kata bust during the pandemic and who helped us out in the moment was. So on top of all these things, I had recently started a new job in a totally different industry. And of course, no one saw this pandemic coming. So that was probably not the greatest time to do so. But so on top of that.
But you don't know the future.
But you don't know the future.
Right.
So I'm in this new job and I'm feeling the stress of learning all of these new things. And then we are 3 weeks into the stay-at-home order and you're watching your baby girl regress. You're watching 3 years of therapy whittle away in 3 weeks. And you start asking, how long is this going to be? And you see your son now trying to move towards virtual, and you see your team of caretakers now have to take care of their own families and shelter in place themselves so that they don't get infected. So all the people that help you have now been whittled down to one person from a team of 12. One day I went on a walk and I thought I was having a heart attack, but I was actually having a panic attack.
Okay.
And I thought for a moment I was praying to get back to the house because I couldn't walk in that moment.
Hey, yes.
So how the village, this was at the very beginning of the stay-at-home order. We weren't sure how this thing spread, right? And I didn't want people in our house, but it was just simply the inner circle do or die village. Quick Zoom, prayed, just talked to me to remind me of who I was in that moment. That helped tremendously. On top of the obvious of, once my husband understood what was going on, he was like, what in the world? So yes. So that was a very real moment at the beginning. And that those are our do or dies. Like they know like our will. They know like the details of our will. Like it's that serious.
Right.
I believe friends are the family you choose.
Right.
And so those are the Those are
Those are the ones.
Yeah, those are the ones, the do or die.
Those are the ones.
Yeah.
The do or
The
dies.
do or dies. And then
it's good, you talked also a little bit on the power of technology, so in this pandemic, having those do or die, because some of my do or dies, because I worked in different nations, I have those type of friends. Some of them are not here, so they might be in Jamaica, they might be in Nigeria, they might be in different states. So just the power of technology, from Zoom platforms to WhatsApp, video calls, to just using your computer, your tablet, just on the go, just the power of technology to really help us and children at this time to connect our village of support is key too. Because imagine if we didn't have these technology platforms, it would be another Wahala challenge that we would have tackled.
It really would. And that also leads the link to what you said about the technology to the telehealth, the telemedicine.
Yes.
Even then, I mean, the way in which you have to vet your medical team. I mean, it's not just, you have to make sure that it's not just a job for them, that it's a calling, because
God bless you. You just said vet. Look, we can have another show on that. And it's not funny, I'm telling you guys, that keyword, I actually did a presentation on health disparities and closing the gaps, and studies that have been shown that when you actually vet and choose the right healthcare provider, you can close that gap. So it showed how, like in one study, how African American lady, she vetted her surgeon. She had to have like brain surgery. She got an African American surgeon, and during that time, I mean, because he has all daughters, he knows like the importance of having your hair done, and she didn't have her hair done before surgery, and he braided her hair. So when she woke up out of surgery, her hair was braided. She was looking fly. So she was asking the nurses, because she just assumed it was the nurses that cleaned her up. They were like, no, it was the surgeon. So just those type of things, like when you're vetting for the details, like when I vetted for my daughter's pediatrician, I was like, yes, I want somebody, because I do a lot of global traveling, so I need somebody that's a Nigerian American or African, that has an African background. So because we do a lot of postings in Africa, so when I go to a regular pediatrician, I'm like, oh, I need pediatric anti-malaria pills. They're looking at me like, what do you mean? Why do you need malaria prevention? I'm like, okay, so you don't get it. So that vetting is extremely, like, we should not take it lightly when it comes to looking for providers that are not only passionate, but that really will go the extra mile. Like these people, if I forget to set an appointment for my daughter, for her annual physical, they're calling me, what's going on, you know what I'm saying? Like they pay attention to details. That can make or break anybody, whether they're a child and adult. If you don't properly vet, even if you go to the emergency room, you can dictate. Like I had a bad situation where we traveled to Florida to visit my sister that time, and it was not a regular hospital. I just had Malaya then, so she was only like 2 months. So I didn't know that when your child is sick, it's better to take them to a children's hospital ER. So they eventually had to, because of her condition, they had to get an ambulance anyway, which cost me more money. So from transferring her from that facility to the children's hospital facility. And the reason why I knew that is because the nurse on duty, I think she was Ghanaian American, she paid attention to details. And she was like, look, when you have a child, especially when you have a child that has some special needs, but just children just in general, take them to a children's hospital emergency room. They will cater better, which I didn't know, So please speak on that issue, like on vetting, very, very well.
Yes, okay, definitely. Well, we had to take our baby girl to the ER in the midst of the pandemic in July of last year because our lives were not already dramatic enough. So we had a great pediatrician who, again, we vetted. We wanted to make sure they had experience with kids on the spectrum. And kids on the spectrum, that term is even very broad. So really quickly, let me just chime in. When people say on the spectrum, when you've met one person on the autism spectrum, you've literally met one person on the autism spectrum. It's just, so they showed very early on an expertise of people on the spectrum from various aspects. the more we talk to them about, we ask for specific examples. And, also you have to understand as a pediatrician to look at the whole human being, like see how autism may be tied to diet, things like that. They understood that. And that helped tremendously, because when we had to make the split-second decision to take our daughter to the ER, it was the pediatrician that called us and said, do not take her to urgent care. They will likely not know what to do with the child, let alone a child on the spectrum. Take her to Children's Hospital in our town.
Yes.
And because they actually have a partnership, they're a teaching hospital, and they also deal with our University of Texas Southwestern, and they have a developmental research center within it. So she goes, make sure you take her there. They will know what to do. And that proved to be so wise and so helpful. So that is an example of a properly vetted pediatrician, because if we hadn't asked those questions on the front end, you don't wait till an emergency to vet. You know what I'm saying?
No, you don't. So, and you just said, and that is the key. Like, you have to be proactive when it comes to health. You have to be proactive. You cannot be reactive and, and reacting in the midst of a crisis and an emergency, because, you're in crisis mode. So you'll miss some things. So these are things that people, need to start thinking of if they haven't thought of now. Identifying, the right pediatrician, the right, family practitioner, gynecologist, whoever that is catering to your needs. You need to vet them now if you don't have one. And even for a pediatrician, like you just said, that pediatrician, even if they don't work with, so my pediatrician for my daughter did not work at the Children's Hospital, but she was Children's Hospital affiliated, meaning that if I take my daughter to the Children's Hospital and the ER, that anything that because after you take them to the ER, you have to follow up with your regular pediatrician. So that's what people don't understand. After the ER, they always tell you follow up with your regular pediatrician after a few days. They can easily, it's because they're affiliated, they can easily pull up your child's file and all the lab tests or whatever tests, exams that they did and screenings at the ER and what they prescribe. They can pull it up on their system because they're an affiliate. Their systems are connected. So that's something that I also did not know, So just going and doing the right research of the pediatrician and the pediatricians that are affiliated with like teaching institutions or children's hospitals that cater to your children's needs are very important. So these are very good tips. So you all, I hope you're paying good attention to avoid Wahala in the future. Yes. So who is your third village or provider? So you said, is it the
medical community, for sure?
The medical community that you identified pre-pandemic, correct? Before.
Yes.
God bless you.
Yes. Amen. God bless you too. It's definitely in our case, because we some people would call us extreme, and that's fine. I'm at the point in my life where I no longer care about such labels. But with us, we even went as far as making sure we bought a home in a community that was within 15 to 30 minute drive of various autism related therapies and a children's hospital, knowing that we had,
that is awesome.
Knowing we had two children, two autistic kids. One requires significantly more community supports than the other. So my baby girl, I mentioned, has IDD, intellectually disabled, as well as autism, as well as apraxia, as well as multiple allergies, all in one child. So that decision ahead of time to make sure we're 15 minutes to the hospital, she has had a deadly allergic reaction that could have ended in a very different way if we were not so close to the hospital.
God forbid. Right. But because you prepared.
Yep.
Your proximity. So you all, there's another saying in our culture, prevention or preparation is better than there's better than cure. we didn't grow up with these things. We didn't understand all these African proverbs. And one of the reasons why I always love, sharing African proverbs and ending my podcast with an African proverb related to the topic is because they're deep, and they go back centuries, but they still, are words of wisdom nuggets that are relevant, in this season and even out of season for seasons to come, in the past, present, and in the future. There is going to be always relevant. So preparation is key. And I love how you broke down your 3 levels of village of supporters. It takes a village, which is also another famous African proverb. And you broke it down from the faith community to your ride or dies to the medical providers. You understand? So, and just your proximity of within your catchment area, building your village of, okay, I'm gonna live close to this facility, this is where I'm gonna buy, like paying attention to those details. We have to pay attention to those details, whether your child has any type of unique issues or not. You still, it goes the extra mile in really raising our wonderful next generation of leaders. These are our future leaders. We really have to pay attention to details, and we need to prepare. So it's not to say that because of course, especially if you're a first-time parent, you make a lot of mistakes, you learn as you go. But that's why we have this podcast, and I believe that's why you even started your Not Your Mama's Autism podcast, because a lot of us experience a lot of wahala that if we knew, or somebody would have told us, like, yo, you need to have these type of village of supporters, or you need to live near a children's hospital, we would have avoided or prevented a lot of wahala pains and trauma that we experienced in the past. So that is why I have special experts, and Queen Lola on the show, really, for World Autism Day. Like, you're a great ambassador, here, and especially in our community. I think in the Nigerian and African community and migrant community, we don't really talk about issues like this. A lot of us are suffering and smiling. They smile, they pretend like everything is okay, and it'll be okay, because we have this perfectionist mentality. It's in our blood. You know what I'm saying? We're Nigerians. We're the most populated nation in Africa. We're the giants. They call us the giants, the leaders of Africa. We're the most populated Black nation in the world, and most of us are stunners. You know what I'm saying? In any sectors that we're in, we're trailblazers. We do a lot, but we suffer a lot within, and there's a lot of things that we tackle that I wish we can be more transparent. So I want to thank you for just your transparency, and I want to thank you for giving us just concrete tools that you have used and that other people can use, that are going through a lot of what you're going through, and that are really suffering in silence. You know what I'm saying? So you're being a voice to the voiceless. So I really, really salute you and honor you. And how can people get in touch with you? How can people find your podcast?
Sure. They can find me on Instagram at Not Your Mama's Autism, at our website, notyourmamasautism.com. And we're also available on all major podcast platforms. Not Your Mama's Autism, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, you name it. And if you said towards the end about transparency, can I briefly just touch upon that, about us, our culture? And
touch on the way.
Okay. I've been thinking about, self-awareness. The older I get, self-awareness is a spiritual gift.
Yes.
And it's something that should be honed over time. And the more we're truthful to ourselves, the better our journeys will be. The reason why I chose Not Your Mama's Autism is because, and you know this, being a mom yourself, when your child has a condition, when your child has an illness, when your child has fill in the blank, it's also the parent's condition, illness, disease, what have you. And my mom, I'm also the sibling of an autistic man with an intellectual disability. And I watch what my mother went through, oftentimes suffering and smiling. So when I now grew up to have not just one, but 2 children on the spectrum myself, I told myself that I would live my life out loud in a way that my mother couldn't. And that is why I make the types of decisions I make today, because my parents did not have those decisions in the 80s and 90s. They did not exist. And that's where Not Your Mama's Autism came from.
Yes, so we salute you. We salute Mommy too. I know your mom, so I salute her as a queen, and you really just carrying that torch of really being the voice of the voiceless, and breaking, that silence, that I say that we do often in our community, and not just in the Nigerian community. I also see the Black community and a lot of my friends from first generational communities. I'll put it like that. That we really suffer in silence. So I really salute you, and I thank you for just your honesty, and just, really dropping some great gems today. So I wanted to ask you if you have any final words, but before your final words, the African proverb that I chose for this podcast show today is, children are the reward of life. Once again, children are the reward of life. And one of the things that we're trying to change, even, at the agency that I support, before they used to say, oh, autistic children. So we used to change, we're like, no, that's offensive. Like, these are children, and children are blessed. They might have a condition, which is like autism or whatever disability. So we should say children with autism, not, autistic children. So just the terminologies of how people are labeled in society. So to understand that, at the end of the day, they're still children. These are wonderful children. Children are a blessing. So once again, the African proverb of the week is, children are the reward of life. So over to you with your last words.
Sure. Different is not deficient. Being wired, your brain being wired differently should not affect one's view of you. And the hope is that we move away from autism awareness to autism acceptance. So April is Autism Awareness Month, but Autism Society of America and others want us to move this on to Autism Acceptance Month, because we should move beyond that to acceptance. Different is not deficient.
That is deep. And it should not just be April. So when you talk about acceptance, that's every day.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
That's every day. So we're just highlighting it globally in April, but it should be accepted every single day. That everybody is unique. Whatever challenges that they might be tackling, every child is unique, and every child is a blessing. When God put us on this earth, we have our own fingerprints. Even if you're a twin, your twin does not have your fingerprints. So you were uniquely created beautifully for such a time as this. So we should all be accepted and celebrated for our awesomeness. So thank you once again for joining the Wellness and Wahala podcast. And I wish you no Wahala Lola this season and this year. God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you too. Thank you.
Thank you.